Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale as well as the latest episode of Deadly Class. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I'll start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Riverdale, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Deadly Class. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Riverdale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. It's kind of interesting because you have the whole thing going on between Tommy and Sierra, and they're getting married. It's so interesting too to see like Josie and Kevin so on board when they were so kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? You know, I especially considering the fact is it was kind of an affair situation, but the fact is they're so on board, being like, whoa, what do you mean you're not going to have a big wedding? Fine, you're not going to have a big wedding, but fine, we'll accept that and we'll support your decision and everything. So I thought that was kind of neat. But lo and behold, it's like, oh, they're having their happy moment, and then them as well as all the other parents get a note about like, oh, you need to finish up the game. It's from the Gargoyle King, in which we know Tall Boy's dead, so it's like, okay, what's going on here? And it's kind of interesting because the note brings up, you know, Penelope's the one that suggests it's like, oh, the fact of the matter is this is all about Sierra and Tom being happy, and it's like he's come to wreck that. In that one moment, I was like, I just thought about that. Not everyone in the Midnight Club has a happy life currently. I mean, each one, you know, doing okay, I guess, in their respective situations, but like the only ones amongst them who are kind of like, oh, all happy, you know, coming together and have a whole bunch of happiness in their life is like Sierra and Tom. Like, I mean, like I said, everyone's, I guess, happy in their own right. You know, Penelope's got her business, Fred's doing okay, but Hermione is caught in the whole situation between her and Hiram, and it's just, you know, it was just something I didn't think about it just now, and it's like, huh, so that's what this is all about. But then it's like, I love that Penelope has showed up with an antidote, you know, in case they have to, you know, complete Ascension Night and everything. And I thought it was so interesting because I was like, whoa, like she's giving them the antidote, which I love. Everyone was hesitant at first. She's like, oh, come on, and she drinks it first, you know, because it's like, I mean, it's understandable why people are reluctant to trust it, because it's like, yeah, we kind of know what your whole deal has been about lately. What's also interesting too, I didn't know cyanide could be counteracted. I guess if you get to it soon enough, or maybe it's one of those things where it's like it can't be administered after, it has to be before in preparation. I didn't know. I mean, I'm assuming just because of that, that's the way they set it up in this, that's how that works, but I never knew that. I never knew there was a cure for cyanide. That's interesting. But what really kind of tripped me out, because it's kind of interesting how this got kind of all like ties together with other aspects of the plot. Like, obviously this all started because Kevin wanted Moose to come out to his dad, but you know, and you know, he kind of sets an ultimatum. He kind of gets Cheryl involved, and it's kind of interesting. I don't know why it took till now for me to kind of put that together. Of like, because obviously Cheryl and Kevin have always been kind of tight. I mean, it was even before she, you know, she found out. Well, I guess she's always kind of knew she was gay. Just like, you know, obviously like she kind of, her mom had an issue with it in the past. Like that's come up in the show of her talking about that. But you know, this is her being like openly gay. You know, her relationship with Tony being happy and everything, and because it just clicked in my head. I was like, oh, like she's being very supportive to Kevin and stuff like that. But they were tight even before then, because it just clicked in my head this episode, be like, all right, you both are gay, and you probably, you know, there's not a lot of gay people in Riverdale, so I'm sure like that kind of makes your bond even stronger in that regard of just being like, you know, embracing it, because Kevin's like openly gay, and so is Cheryl. They embrace who they are, they don't shy away from who they are. And so it was just kind of interesting to me to think like, oh, I guess that makes, but like I said, Cheryl wasn't in that same situation, like, you know, when her and Kevin started getting buddy. Like, I think even back in season 1, they were becoming buddies. But I think more so in season 2. But nevertheless, that's just me going off on a tangent. But Cheryl kind of forced Moose's hand, because she basically narrowed it down to be like, there's someone in the, you know, ROTC program that's gay that, you know, their boyfriend wants them to come out, you know, and be accepted. And as Riverdale, let's come together and accept him. And it's like, yeah, but you shouldn't force someone's hand in that type of situation. Someone should always come out when they want to. And even Tony kind of chewed her out for it. Because for her, it's like, the fact is, she talks about the fact is, it needs to be kind of like a safe environment for someone to come out. Because like for her, it's like her uncle didn't appreciate the fact that she was gay. Which is interesting, because she talked about her being a legacy, which I guess that makes it a, because I would assume, because she had talked about like the serpents being kind of like she's a legacy amongst them, didn't she? So like her, you know, it's in her family, so it's like it's just interesting because it's like her uncle wouldn't accept her, but obviously the serpents would. But I guess her uncle wasn't part of the serpents. Maybe a different part of her family was part of the serpents. Maybe she isn't a legacy like I thought she was. Maybe she referenced him as a family, but I could have sworn she had talked about it as kind of like this is her legacy. Like she's a part of this, like through blood, kind of like, you know, Jughead is. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe I'm just misremembering. But she ended up bringing up some interesting points of like Cheryl doesn't always have to be Miss Chaos. It's like, I get it. You're pissed at your mom about the whole she's blocking you from getting into the school you want to just because your mom. It's like because of who you are and everything, which is like, really? You have the audacity to judge her with all your proclivities? But, you know, it's kind of like proclivities. I had to go back and clean it up because I slurred that a lot. But the fact is, you doing your whole thing and you got the nerve to judge your daughter. It's just interesting, like that hate relationship they have for each other. It's a very unique relationship. Like even with, you know, Veronica and Hermione's relationship being what it is, it's still nothing compared to what Cheryl and Penelope's is. Like the venom in that relationship is incredible. Funny, I would say venom considering the fact is that they are pretty poison later on. You know, Tony might not be part of the Serpents anymore, but Cheryl is putting together her own group so that Tony can feel at home and have a family to kind of, you know, embrace and be a part of, which is kind of interesting. I'm curious to see what that ends up growing and becoming. Nevertheless, but, you know, it is interesting, you know, like obviously Tony loves Cheryl, but the fact is she can get a little crazy with the whole causing chaos and everything. It's like she didn't blame Cheryl, but like, to be fair, them getting kicked out was kind of on Cheryl because she made up, plus she made a point to kind of point Hiram towards the serpents and stuff like that because she had her own vendetta against them and everything. So it's kind of like even leaving that mark to be like, oh yeah, it was me who totally did it, and pointing the finger at the serpents as well. So, but Tony played her own part in that too. So I guess that's why she never blamed Cheryl for it, because it's like, yeah, I played my own part into it. I didn't have to participate, but I wanted to. So it was just kind of interesting. So Cheryl did everything she could this episode to kind of make up for it. Also, you gotta give major props to her. The fact is that she going all full blown like that, and her whole Robin Hood thing. I love that. That's like an aspect of her character. That archery stuff is badass. Like even later on, when she shows up, arrow in hand and everything, it's like, dude, you're so badass. But I was actually kind of surprised when, like, you know, Moose was actually like, okay, yeah, I came out to my dad. I was like, and he was okay with it. I was like, huh. I was like, that don't sound right. That sounds like there's going to be more to it. Like he's pretending to be okay, but it turns out that is the case, because it's like, Gargoyle King is targeting him because like they realized that everything the parents went through, it's like this wasn't, you know, the actual Gargoyle King. Someone had set them up so they could be away from their children. Now, was that I guess it makes it easier to target everybody if you get all the parents out of the way, I guess. But it's just like, the fact is you went out of the way to do that kind of made me go, I guess because you know, we find out that everyone involved in this was Moose's dad. Now that took me by surprise. Even the ROTC were a part of it, because all of this was like some sick, twisted way to scare the gay out of Moose. I was like, that's super messed up. But we kind of found out why it's so messed up, because he was taken to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy. It's kind of interesting because you had that moment earlier in the episode where it's kind of like, oh yeah, Tom and Moose's dad Mason were actually good buds, but then like they kind of fell apart as time went on, and Sierra's kind of like, yeah, he kind of had a thing for me, and it's like, no, the person he had a thing for was Tom, and it's like that's why things kind of distance between them. And I guess Tom never told anybody. I mean, it somehow got back to Mason's family, or at least his dad, and he got sent off to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy. I don't know whether Tom told somebody or whatever happened in that situation. But for him, that's what this is all about. The fact is that he took the persona of the Gargoyle King because that's what scared him straight. And so he wanted to do the same thing to his son. And even FP was like, man, they really messed you up for you to go to such an extent. They scared you with the Gargoyle King, and now you're trying to do the same thing to your son. And it's like, because even Cheryl was kind of like, yeah, it's kind of messed up, because even the Sisters of Quiet Mercy messed up his soul. And it's like, yeah, he was kind of a victim in all of this too. Just their whole messed up thing. I mean, I guess I guess some solid silver lining. I mean, it doesn't take away the damage they've already caused, but they're not around to cause any more damage anymore. So I guess that's the silver lining to the situation. But sadly, Moose is leaving because, I mean, it's understandable. It's like, literally your dad, like, couldn't accept you for being who you are. So he went about a roundabout way to literally scare you straight. And it's like, that's super messed up. Like, how can you stay in a town knowing that your dad was willing to do that just because, I mean, because that means he doesn't accept you. It almost makes it go like, he doesn't love me, you know? He can't love me for me. Especially because Moose was like, oh man, me and my dad had this moment. We had, what, like chicken pot pies or something at Pop's. And it's like, oh, he thought, like, oh, everything's good. And for him, I'm sure it's like, you know, staying in Riverdale is just going to be a reminder of that. And it's sad for Kevin. He finally got what he wanted. Him and Moose can be out in the open. It's like, I can have you as my boyfriend. Like, I really like you and care about you. Because even Cheryl is like, you could just move on. But he's like, no, I like Moose. I don't want to be with anybody else. And it's like, just when you get everything you want, it comes crashing down like that. So Moose is leaving, at least for now, to go stay with his aunt. You know, so that just kind of sucks. I'm curious to see what Kevin ends up doing about all that. Then also at the same time, there's the whole Archie and Josie storyline. And it's kind of interesting. I was wondering what they were going to do with Josie and Archie. Like, the fact is they made it like, you know, it seemed like they were pushing them in that direction. And it's like, I like what they did because Josie's in a very similar situation to Archie in the sense of like, Archie came back to town. He kind of feels like he's not himself. Like, obviously, you know, the whole stranger aspect of like, he's alone. He was alone for so long. And now he's alone again, almost feeling like a complete stranger in his own life. And Josie basically walled off everyone. Like, obviously her and Sweet Pea, but for her it's like, no, I don't, you know. But Sweet Pea was like, yeah, I would be with you in an instant, but I don't want this whole like coming into my life, you know, when you get lonely, you just want to be with someone. It's like, I can't have that. Like, if we're going to be together, it's got to be all in type of thing. But for Josie, it's like she put up all these walls. Like, obviously, like, her and the Pussycats aren't, you know, tight. So it's that situation of like, she sacrificed everything to get here, you know, try to get off to a great school, like obviously build a career. Because even she's like, I don't even want my mom to take me there because if things go bad, she's going to ask me, well, what's your backup plan? It's like, I don't have anything. Like, this is where her heart leads her to be a singer. Like, her hopes and dreams are all into this. And like, she doesn't want her mom trying to take that away from her in some shape or form if it doesn't work out. And, you know, Archie's there supporting her and understanding her, what it's like to kind of block all the people out. Because even for Josie, it's like, I sacrificed everything for what? Because she ends up not being able to get into Juilliard. And it's like, it was all kind of for nothing. But no matter what, you know, Archie's like, I'm there for you, even when it's all said and done. And they're singing together. And then like, I'm like, yo, it's kind of interesting considering the fact is where Josie and Archie started. Like, think back to the beginning of the series. Josie kind of was like, it's kind of like, me and the Pussycats, this is our thing. You can tag along, but don't, you know. So she was kind of a little harsh towards Archie, but the thing, they got to where they are now. But hopefully, you know, they can bring a little bit of something to each other's lives, you know, because Archie's already in the process of figuring things out because of Josie. She kind of set him on the right path again, and it's like, maybe they can, you know, help tear down those walls around each other, you know. So I think that's kind of neat what they're doing in that regard. So it's like, there's sad endings around, but there's also happy endings because it's like, oh, there's Archie and Josie, and then there's Tom and Sierra, and then there's Tony and Cheryl. You know, everyone's kind of happy. I mean, you know, Veronica and Reggie, which they kind of caught in their own situation because Hermione's like, oh, yes, so you're going to pay back that money. We never found out exactly how much, but Reggie was kind of like, oh, yeah, I'm going to steal from my dad, which is also that sad part of Reggie being like, oh, yeah, you know, it's also payback for his dad always giving me those shiners. It's like, well, that's like, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that, you know, when he hit Reggie for bringing up Griffins and Gargoyles before. That wasn't the first time, which is super sad. And just for him, it's like, yeah, this is his way of paying his dad back. Ended up stealing money. It's like, oh, you got shot. Luckily, it wasn't anything vital, but... And there's also the die pack situation. I'm like, well, they are amateurs after all. But to be fair, I'm like, you wouldn't think of a die pack because it is like a motor dealership. So it's like, why would they have die? I mean, I don't know. I would assume every business has that. But at the same time, I'm like... I guess they wouldn't, because like in my head, I always associate it as being a bank thing, but maybe everyone does that. But I don't know. I mean, it doesn't help that they're also amateurs too. So, but nevertheless, then the twist of finding out the person who Hermione, I always butcher her name a little bit. It's like, I don't know why, like, pronouncing her name screws me up a little bit. I slur it up and mess up. But nevertheless, turned out the person behind this is Jughead's mom, Gladys. Didn't see that come out. I was like, it's got to be someone we know, isn't it? Because I saw the boots, I was like, it's not Penny, is it? Because I brought it up before about Penny, and then I remembered, I was like, no, Gladys killed her, didn't she? And lo and behold, nope, it is Gladys. And she drops the bomb. It's like, oh yeah, I'm Jughead's mom. It's like, wait, you're Jughead's mom? And she's like, don't worry, I'm gonna clean the money, and we'll come up with some installment plan. Also, the fact is, Reggie's car is mine. What's also interesting too, because even she's like, man, I feel so bad for you. Your mom is cutthroat. I mean, she's always been a little cold, but the fact of the matter is, sending you out here to solve her problems, didn't even have the chance to handle it yourself, which is kind of messed up in the rest of it. It's like, yeah, you are sending, like, no matter what Veronica did, you're the one that put your family in this situation in the first place. Now that in itself is very interesting, because in the grand scheme of things, it's like, so what the hell is Gladys doing? Because even she's coming back, she's here with Jelly Bean, and the fact of the matter is, she's like, oh, we're going to be sticking around a little bit, telling that to both Veronica and Reggie, as well as saying that to Jughead and FP. And then it becomes a situation of, it's like, oh, Jelly Bean's like, oh yeah, I got data wrapped around my fingers. And you have, Gladys being like, oh, it's all kind of working out in the end, because it's like, okay. Because in retrospect, I was like, why is she mixed up in this? I felt like she would hate the lodges, especially like how much trouble follow Archie to her. I mean, the fact of the matter is, her main concern in all of that, she doesn't really have that much of an issue with Hermione and Hiram. She kind of does, probably, just from like a criminal perspective, she probably does, but it was kind of like, it's more so like, oh yeah, like Jughead would have gotten mixed up in it. So that's her big, I'm sure, hang up about the whole situation, was like, Jughead potentially getting caught up in the middle of it. But it's like, because Jughead had already called her out, like, oh yeah, like her whole operation was like, her and the kids were stripping cars. So that was kind of like their whole hustle. So it's like, it's not like she's not above the criminal business, but to be kind of getting in bed with Hermione, I wonder, why did she decide to do that? I'm assuming that this is all about her trying to, maybe it's about supporting other kids, kind of raising her potential in like the criminal enterprise, and so she's doing this herself. But the sad thing is, even Jelly Bean's a part of that too, because it's so interesting, because you had the whole aspect of like, you almost think like, oh, FP kind of had everything with like the whole serpent thing, so you thought like, oh, he had, and maybe that's why Gladys stayed away. It's like, no, she kind of had, like, Gladys isn't, necessarily the best person either. I mean, once again, let's not forget what the hell she did to Penny. So it's kind of interesting to be like, oh yeah, and it, it's not just one, like, that whole family's kind of in that criminal world, I guess. The serpents aren't really, but they kind of are. I mean, FP's whole situation in season 1, but nevertheless, it's just interesting. So I'm curious to see what kind of trouble Gladys brings to her, because I was wondering if she connected to all this in any shape or form. It's like, no, it seems like she's doing this mainly for herself. It doesn't seem like it's a Griffin and Gargoyle situation, or like a Gargoyle King thing. It seems like it's just her like personal business, and she's trying to take advantage of it. I mean, she's got FP being sheriff. She can take that advantage of that, especially where Hermione and FP stand. Like, I'm sure Gladys could end up using that to her advantage, especially if she uses JB's relationship with her dad. That could sway a lot of stuff in her favor potentially. And I'm sure it's going to end up being her doing the same thing to Jughead too, because she made such a point to tell Veronica, like, oh yeah, make sure Jughead doesn't find out about this, or I might let it slip to your dad that your mom tried to, like, make this whole deal behind his back and everything, causing that problem. So she's not to be trifled with, but also kind of shows you what she's willing to do. I mean, for her, it's like she's trying to preserve her relationship with Jughead, because she knows if he found out the truth, because the whole thing is like, you're in this world too, especially because Jughead made the serpent stop the whole selling drug situation. And so knowing his mom is connected to that, potentially dragging not only to his, other kids, but mainly his sister into everything that she's up to. So I'm sure Jughead would have a huge problem with that. So very interested to see where all that goes. And then there's also the situation of, okay, so it isn't Tallboy. I figured as much. I felt like it couldn't have been Tallboy. It's like, definitely wasn't Tallboy way back when it came to Featherhead's death and all this chalice stuff. So that wasn't necessarily him. So it's like, so, we got Tallboy, which he can't be, Gargoyle King. He's dead. Now you had, Moose's dad show up as a Gargoyle King. It's like, every time you turn around, there's someone else putting on this cloak and stuff like that. So it's like, who's the real Gargoyle King, if there's one at all, So that mystery still stands, who that possibly could be. So I'm very interested to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Deadly Class, a crazy episode. It's so interesting how this episode was kind of designed in a certain degree, because it's like a lot of this episode kind of has like this, Breakfast Club vibe to it, which is interesting because I feel like I've referenced that before. Like, I think I've talked about that. It's like, what the movie's kind of about, even though I've never seen the movie, which is so crazy. I mean, it's just one of those classics I feel like most people have seen. I'm sure not everyone has, but still, nevertheless, it's just kind of even though I'm not that familiar with the movie, I know enough about it to be like, it kind of fits this aesthetic, a whole bunch of misfits coming together in detention for different reasons. I was curious about it, though. We did have like Saya there. I was like, what did Saya do? Like, I didn't know what the whole situation was. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Because she brings it up later on. It's because of Marcus being her pledge. He suffers the consequences, so does she. It's like whatever happens to him happens to her as well, And it's like, right, I forgot about that. I mean, I knew it, but it's like it didn't click in my head immediately until she brought that up. But this episode was interesting in that regard because even enemies were somewhat allies. Like, Chico and Marcus are actually kind of cool to each other this episode. Chico wasn't spending the entire time, like, trying to kill Marcus. And the fact of the matter is they're shit-talking each other, but everybody kind of is, but they're kind of having fun at the same time. Even later on when Chico and Marcus are geared up and they're, like, hitting each other with those stick things. And it's just like, what the hell is going on here? And then, like, Saya is getting on a bike. She's jumping over stuff. Like, everyone's making bets and having fun. And it's just like, whoa. I even love the thing about, like, basically, Chico was kind of like, I've never had, like, fingers up my ass or something like that. And that just makes you stronger or whatever. And then, like, Petra's like, well, that means that, Victor is 3 times stronger. And Victor's like, she's a liar. Like, it's just crazy circumstances. You have that side of the episode, but then it, like, takes a hard turn when the people from Kuroki, the Kuroki Syndicate show up. I like that. I don't know if you notice about me. I love Oni Mask. They are like the coolest thing to me. If you remember the Jackie Chan Adventures, the animated show, the Oni Mask that's probably like my favorite like arc in the show, because it just like that was just like such a cool thing. And so it kind of reminds me of that, but I just like the design of Oni Mask and stuff like that. But yeah, basically we end up finding out those are her people. Like, this whole situation was about her family keeping ties on her. In particular, it seems like it's her brother behind all this, because she says, like, basically she didn't leave Tokyo under the best circumstances. Like, because I'm curious, like, obviously it's some like must have been like some power struggle situation or something, like, because for her, like, Saya kept bringing up the sword the entire time. It seemed like it was just like an honor thing, because she kept referencing Bushido and honor. So I was like, okay, so that's why it's so important. But for her, it's like, no, this sword is the last bit she has left of her dad. And I think, Marcus can kind of understand to a certain extent too, like, having lost, both his parents in that regard. And it just, not necessarily the same regard, because we don't know what Saya's circumstances are. But I'm wondering, is it like a power struggle situation? Her brother took over. Did he, usurp the Kuroki Syndicate? Like, what is it like? Because I feel like, I guess it depends on how old her brother is. I'm assuming her brother's older than her, but maybe he's not. Cause I was like, is she supposed to be like next in line? But then again, I'm like, I feel like in that whole hierarchy, this isn't just like, I'm across most hierarchies, it's like the boy gets the title next. So I wouldn't feel like Saya would be eligible for it anyway necessarily, even if she was the oldest. But maybe it is that situation of eldest comes first no matter the gender. So I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. Also, I should also note, I did not know this until like I found out like a couple days ago. Did not piece it together that the actress who plays Saya, Lana Condor, same actress from all the Netflix movie All the Boys I've Loved. It didn't click in my head until I looked. I was like, why does she also look so familiar? Like, she looks a little bit different as Saya because her hair is a little shorter and stuff like that. But I haven't seen the movie, but I heard good things about it. I should really watch the movie, especially, looking for something a little rom-comish. But it was kind of like, holy crap, I didn't realize that was the same actress. Also, side note, kind of film, I didn't, because I've yet to actually see the movie. I need to get around to it. Apparently, she was also in X-Men Apocalypse. She played Jubilee. That was kind of interesting. I was like, what? That's crazy. Nevertheless, but like I said, that hard shift in this episode, it also started too with poor Jaden getting his hand cut off. And so it's sad because he had that moment with Petra where she gave him like the Pop Rocks, the Mountain Dew, and the cheese, and he's just like, oh my god, it's so good. Got his hand cut off, and then Chico pushes him into the Kuroki syndicate people after him. I mean, especially too because it's sad because like, you know, Chico, you know, it's kind of interesting because Chico does try to act all tough and macho and all of that. And then on top of that too, it's like we also kind of learned a little bit about him in this episode that his little brother is no longer around, and Marcus is like, I didn't know. I'm sorry about that. I didn't know. He's like, why would you know? You know? And it's just so interesting to me that you know, because Marcus had brought up the fact is like we've all lost people, and now we kind of learned about Saya, and now we know about Marcus, and we learned about hell, we learned about Petra's story too. Her and Victor got messed up, but it's like Petra's, man, everybody's story is messed up, dude. Like Petra's whole thing with her mom, her dad being religious, but then like shit went crazy. I guess he went nuts. I guess he went from being like a religious dude to like a cult leader or something because I'm the Messiah. Put her mom through all that, and her mom stopped talking to her, and then having her look like her mom's eyes were taken out, and then having her, you know, Petra look at them eyes because when you look at someone who's about before their soul leaves their body, you no longer fear death. That's kind of the whole point. It's like, Jesus, that's crazy. It's actually interesting because even Petra's like, open your eyes, Victor. And he's like, why do you even care? She's like, I don't, but I'm not going to die alone. And I think it did kind of do something to her, where it's like, I guess when she looked into Victor's eye and kind of brought that story up, it just kind of solidified in her, and she kind of seemed like she stopped being afraid to a certain extent. It's like, but man, I think it's no surprise, like everyone kind of has like a fucked up, you know, backstory in this situation. I mean, it's kind of like a fucked up show in its own right, but it's kind of interesting how it kind of blends kind of like this, having this like, oh, school lightheartedness to it. Hey, like I said, Breakfast Club aspect to like literally running for your life because masked warriors are literally coming there to slice you up. Is that, I mean, Chico bailed on everybody. It's not like he found a way out and he bailed and just kind of like, hey, you know, it's kind of interesting, like I said, because he acts so tough, but he ran under the circumstances, so he's not the badass he claims to be when the going gets tough. He literally screwed him over to the point he broke the key off in the lock and locked them in there. It's like, why do you have to be such a piece of shit? It's not like he even bothered to try and go get help either. It's like, you're in this situation on your own because Marcus wanted to help Saya in whatever way he could. And just kind of, because he even said the same thing about Jaden. It's like, you don't like what I did, Marcus, but I saved us. There's no bandages in here. He, you know, he was going to die anyway. It's like, but the fact of the matter is, maybe they could have helped him long enough to get, you know, help. You know, luckily Petra and Victor were able to get help, but you know, I don't know, maybe Jaden still would have died. We don't know what would have happened if, like, that's just crazy. No wonder the hell Maria wants to get away from him in that regard. It's actually interesting because she actually went to Willie for help, and he actually kind of comes through in the end. I love that whole like hiding it in the comic book thing. It's like, yo, like I don't want to spoil the ending for you, but the brother comes through to help in the end. The fact of the matter is, you know, kind of telling Maria that, you know, do what you got to do to get away from whatever situation you're in. And he's like, also, don't tell Marcus that I was reading any of his indie shit. But sadly, you know, Chico was there when she got back to her room, but she was able to hide the passport. Kind of, I saw the mirror. I was kind of worried that maybe Chico would have seen her putting it in her back pocket. So she does have an out. I'm curious because she said, I'm not going to tell the cartel. Now, was she not going to tell the cartel because it would have meant that Chico would have found out? Or was it because she just doesn't want Chico, but also the cartel to know? Because if she probably ran, the cartel would probably be like, no, bring her ass back type of situation. You know, I'm curious how that would work. I feel like it probably lends itself to both, like running away from Chico and the cartel, just because like they're probably the reason. Because it seems like it's not like a love situation. It seems like it's probably like it might be like an arranged marriage or a relationship type of thing of like they got to be together. Like maybe it's bringing two different people, two different groups of the cartel together or something. That type of thing. We get like you know, royalty from different families kind of getting married. Like I'm curious, it's something like that. There's complications because we end up finding out that apparently there's someone else like in a similar situation to Jurgen, where it's like, you know, Lynn is still kind of, you know, caught up about it. He's still thinking about everything from last episode, even like, you know, King's Dominion not being what it used to be. And it's like, she's like, don't worry, Jurgen's smart, he'll get away. But Lynn's like, he won't for long. The fact of the matter is, all I did was delay the inevitable. And she's like, you didn't do it for me. So Jurgen's not the first person Lynn couldn't go through with it when it was like orders to make this person disappear. So did Lynn fake her death, or is she still on the run and I guess Lynn's kept her safe the entire time? It's kind of sad that Lynn ended up having to leave. It's because of the Jurgen situation that probably made him go to see her. He probably had the whole point, because the kid was on the outside watching Lynn, so it was most likely he knew Lynn's schedule. So, but we're also have to be careful because that bastard's still around, Yukiko, and he's going to be selling Saya out. Like, I thought it was just going to be to watch her. I mean, it kind of was. That was the whole point, but didn't expect things to kind of turn ugly like they did. It is kind of interesting that, like, even when it's all said and done, Marcus and Saya have kind of grown closer together to the point, like, the whole motorcycle thing, he did that to kind of, perk her up a little bit. Misery loves company, but company does not like misery. And, being there, it's like, hey, I know I came here, if you ever wanted to talk about it, and because, like, she ended up killing one of her cousins. And for her, she cried because I guess for her, she didn't think it would be that hard, especially considering what they were trying to do, take her back home and everything. And who knows what would have happened if that happened. Probably her brother probably would have killed her himself. Who knows? But the fact is, I think it's because, one, probably her first kill, I'm assuming. Maybe not. But also the fact is that was our cousin she killed. So even if it wasn't her first kill, that was a family she killed. And especially because she has a complicated relationship with him, because it's like she was always pit against him for practice and training, and he would never hold back on her. There's a big size difference. He's like 2 feet taller than her, but he would be harder on her even than her own brother would be, just because he expected great things for her and she kind of resented him for it. But maybe in the end it kind of got her to where she is. Maybe in the end it made her stronger. Who knows? So crappy situation all around on that front, I'm curious to see what this means. Like, I don't think Marcus and Chico will be as close like they were kind of in this episode. Like, I think, after what Chico did, he's probably on Marcus's shit list once again. It's kind of like you had a moment of kind of being a decent person, and then you just had a shit all over it. So I'm curious, like, is he going to be someone we kind of learn about next? Chico, like, stuff about his brother and like why he is the way he is. I think like anyone else, because it's interesting because for Marcus, that whole voiceover of like how like all wearing a mask, trying to fit in, and eventually we kind of lose ourselves. We kind of become a shadow of who we used to be, that weak version of ourselves before we learn how to fit in. I thought that was kind of an interesting aspect. Also, the whole thing of like every aspect of life is suffering, even happiness, because we know that it will never last long. The fact is that we are all a combination of, I forgot what the exact word it was that he used, but it's kind of interesting. Kind of saying, all life was suffering in that regard. And it's like, man, that's depressing. And I guess under these circumstances, you probably kind of feel like that, because it's just kind of like everything just kind of went to shit, Like, and it fits the narrative because, like I said, it started off so happy and like, oh wow, wacky adventures, breaking into where Lynn's got all this stuff, stashed that he confiscated. But it's like, then it immediately turned to suffering and shit, So doesn't just stop there, because then there's the whole Billy situation. Went home for his little brother. Next time we see Billy, black eyes and cuts and bruises all over his face because his dad apparently owes the mob, and a way to pay back your debt is for Billy to be at this school so that he can go work for the mob to basically pay off the debt. And, when the time came, Billy couldn't do anything. He couldn't fight his dad back or hit him or kill him. And he's like, why can't I do that? And, Marcus is like, it means that you're still intact, that there's still some part of you that still loves him because he is your dad. But he's like, no, like, the fact of the matter is my little brother is he's a very, very good kid. And it's just kind of like, my mom and my brother won't survive him if I leave them in that situation. So he wants him and Marcus to go to Vegas and kill him. And it's like, phew. That's definitely going to be interesting. We might, it's kind of interesting too, because I feel like this is one of the few times, especially, with the exception of like the Petra stuff, I feel like this is one of the few times we've seen Billy very serious. Like, he never gets like that. Like I said, like, I guess that was always his mask, you know, kind of like laughing and stuff. Like, I brought that up last episode. Like, I think that's his way of compensating. But it's like I said, ain't nobody got a happy story in this situation. I mean, why would they? But still, you know? And then we've got Burnface showing up at Shab's place. I love that dude is still there, just like enjoying it, living it up. It's like, did you ever have any intentions of leaving? You never know. Did you know when Shab's parents were going to come back or something? When they come back, and then they mention a school, and he's there like, hey, so what school are you talking about? So he's on his way to find Marcus. Then he's also got Home Dude, which I don't know if I brought that up before. Like, that dude, I think he's a stand-up comic. I'm pretty sure he is, yeah. Like the show Sarah Silverman, wasn't it like the Sarah Silverman program? It's like one of the first things I remember seeing him in. But yeah, I know him from that, but I've definitely seen him in other stuff too. But I love that he was there with a chain around his neck, almost like he was being kept like a pet or something. So things are definitely going to get interesting. I'm curious, like, is Lynn going to suffer any ramifications for this? Because it's like, yeah, all that went down while you were away. Like, higher up, whoever runs everything is probably going to have words to say to him. Potentially. Like I said, we'll see. Like, because, man. I also love that we even got that moment when they were sneaking past the monks. They were fixing, like, Hot Pockets or something in the microwave. And it's like, well, I guess they are just people, too, even though we don't get to see their faces. Like I said, this is just such a fascinating episode. A lot of stuff went down, and I'm very interested to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.